Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's virtual event, Secret Sauce for 2024 Survival, Repurposing Content and Sanity Saving Tech. I'm Jonathan Gandalf, the founder and CEO of The Juice and today's host of this event. Before we jump into the actual content of the event, just a few housekeeping items to take care of. The million-dollar question, yes, today's recording will be made available to you post-event, so you don't have to worry about that. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to insert those in the chat or in the Q&A on the right side of your screen. We'll do our best to answer those either as they come in, if they're relevant to the topic we're talking about at the moment, or we'll absolutely save time at the end to answer those questions. Lastly, just a quick overview of the agenda. We're going to get started with a few introductions here. We're going to have our conversation around all things 2024. And as mentioned previously, we'll save time to answer any questions you may have at the end. So without further ado, let's start with a quick round of introductions. Lindsay, we'll begin with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Casted?
I sure can. Yeah, I'm Lindsay Chepkema. I am CEO and co-founder of Casted, which is a podcast and video marketing platform specifically for B2B marketers. And I'm here with my co-founder, Adam Paterino.
Hey, everybody. Adam, Lindsay's co-founder. I run the product side of the organization. So taking all of those crazy and wonderful ideas from Lindsay and bringing them to life.
Thank goodness.
Along the way, I've developed a lot of my own opinions on working with marketers. I'm a career technologist. I've worked with marketers most of my career in the B2B space. So I'm excited for the conversation today.
What's up, everyone? I have a question for you all. My name is Mark Hillens. I work with Adam and Lindsay on lots of different things. So I want to know right now, what is your favorite thing to repurpose? Favorite thing to repurpose? I co-founded a company called TACK. Been doing a lot with content since my early days at HubSpot. That's the quick history on me. Good to see many of you. I see many familiar faces in the virtual chat. So again, I'm going to be using this whiteboard today. What is your favorite thing to repurpose? Throw it in the chat right now. I don't see anyone commenting, Lindsay or Adam. That's very not acceptable.
Well, here, I'll get it started with conversation. My favorite thing that I've been doing recently is repurposing coffee mugs into ice cream bowls. It's great because you've got the handle of the mug and the spoon. And it's almost, you're using both hands, but it's basically hands-free. And it's a little bit of portion control depending on the size of the mug that you select. From a B2B content perspective, I would say podcasts, as Lindsay's fighting back with her Post-it note versus whiteboard. I'm excited to see this matchup unfold throughout the course of the event. Well, cool. Thank you all for joining us. This is a really interesting event. We're taking a marketing lens on the conversation, but as you all just saw, a cool group of kind of leaders in the space, founders as well. So maybe we can save some time for that at the end as well. So let's start with 2024 survival. The big kind of topic and title for today's conversation. We have all heard, and I fight the urge to roll my eyes when I say this, but the do more with less, the way generative AI is changing everything, the old school B2B playbooks changing everything. And it is very real. I think it all is changing. But when people are saying do more with less or playbooks are changing, what does that actually mean in your day-to-day? Yeah. Lindsay, again, I'm going to tee this up to you, but then maybe let others bounce around and respond to it. What does 2024 survival mean for you?
Okay, so I actually, I've been interviewing on a podcast that has yet to be published. A lot of different marketing leaders, kind of like the influencer set and the CMO set. And I've asked, among many other things, I've asked that question. And I'm so excited to hear them saying what I feel too, which is, yeah, do more with less can actually mean two things. It can mean, hey, no budget, no team, higher goals, do more with less, which is what I think a lot of we're feeling, a lot of people that are here today are feeling. But it can also mean permission and excitement and encouragement to get more creative and say, do more with less, like get more creative, less complication and less like of all of the different channels and all of the different things and all the different KPIs, and just go get creative and just go do more, with your brains and with your ability to really think outside the box. And so I think why survive when you can thrive in 2024, and really tapping into that creative, that human connection, saying, what have I got? What do I already have? How can I get weird in 2024 to really say, you know what, this is fun. How can I have fun again and connect with people in the midst? So that's where I'm at with it.
I love that. I think when a lot of the space is using a lot of the same, maybe, and we'll talk about this in more depth later, but generative AI, right? We're all creating very similar looking, feeling content. It's almost making it easier for others to zig when they're zagging, and stand out. And now is the time to experiment. I love that, Lindsay. You're kind of like, it's almost giving us permission to do more and to try different things, when sometimes constraints can breed creativity. That's really good.
Sure.
Mark, are you scribbling on that whiteboard? I'm so curious. Every time you put your head down, I'm like, oh no, what's he writing?
Yeah. So this is, I maybe this is the mantra for today's discussion. Never leave an offer behind. That is my thoughts these days. I mean, I think it applies to all of the companies we represent. And I actually think it's a common problem when it comes to marketers, salespeople, other creators. Doesn't matter what you're kind of creating, but like, we create something and then it's like, oh, let's move on to the next thing. And we sometimes move on to the next thing too fast. So never leave an offer behind. And I have these 4 things maybe we can unpack. We could talk about how to do it from like technology or using technology and examples of things that we do to make sure we don't do this. But how do you like repackage? So Jonathan, take these down. Repackage, reposition, recycle, and recreate something you've already created so it's never left behind. You got those
3 of the re's: repackage, reposition, recycle,
recreate. And there might be like, what's the difference between recycle and recreate? We can debate that and get to that.
Love it. We'll come back to those themes throughout the event. I'm curious though, is there any, before we move on to this 2024 topic, is there anything that you all feel like is just hype? You know, I'll give my example. I am, you know, my hot take I've been coming in with is people are saying Outbound is dead. And I'm like, Outbound's not dead. I think a lot of people's Outbound is just lazy and uninspired at this point. But is there anything out there that's happening that you feel like every time you see just makes your skin kind of crawl, or you feel like is just people talking to talk?
I mean, there's 2 letters that come to mind. I feel like AI is very, very, I mean, there's so much good. It is changing the world. It will change the world. Like we're implementing AI into Casted. Like
Yeah,
that would be like, I'm not saying it's hype. Like, you know, the internet was not hype. It's a thing, right. But it's definitely everywhere. There's a lot of people doing it wrong. There's a lot of people spraying it around like Febreze, and that's not how it works. So I don't know. Adam is in my world. Adam is the AI guy, and so I'd be curious to hear his thoughts on hype versus reality.
Yeah, I think from a technology standpoint, you're seeing a lot of dollars from investors and maybe some early dollars from marketers going out to buy a lot of this technology, which is yet to really prove its value. I don't know if any of you have really tried AI tech yet, but most of the marketers I talk to leave quite frustrated and quite underwhelmed. And there is so much danger of us all creating the same thing, looking the same, just for the sake of getting more and more content out there. I think another part of this overhype is do more with less. That's every year. Like, that's all the time. That really hasn't changed for a marketer. Like, it's not like in years past, marketers had the easiest job in the world. That's crazy. And it's not like Outbound just this year is becoming difficult. It's been something that we've all been challenged with for years as people's attention has been difficult to get a hold of. So my focus, I think, in 2024 is how do you reach your audience where they are? And I think it aligns really closely with Mark saying about using really meaningful content and finding a way to get it into the cozy and warm places that your audience is spending genuine time with, so you can genuinely connect with them.
Yes, I don't think any marketer has said, I have too many resources this year. What am I going to do?
I've not heard that yet.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever heard that.
Yeah, right. Cool. Well, Mark, I'm going to use your repackage, reposition, recycle, and recreate to throw it to you. Content is obviously the role of content's changing as we head into 2024. Maybe not the role is changing, but how we're producing it, how everyone is thinking about it. Do you maybe want to go like a click deeper on either all four of those, or maybe just pick on one of those to talk about how you and the team at TACK are thinking about content in 2024?
Yeah, I'll tee it up, and then Lindsay can chime in, and Adam can talk about it more from like a tech standpoint. I think it's both like how to do it, examples, and then like what technology you can use to do it. So let's start with repackage. Repackage to me is two different things. You can repackage for different audiences, which gets into repositioning, but you can repackage things for different audiences. Like an example of that would be packaging something up for a busy executive. It's going to look different than a day-to-day practitioner, right? Or packaging something up for my 4-year-old is going to look different than packaging something up for myself or my wife. And that's an extreme example, but we can get into that. And I'll give you some examples in a second. And then you could also repackage things for channels, because different channels will be better served with different ways you present your offer, you present the content. Right. And an example of that would be LinkedIn is a huge lover of these PDF carousels. So we could take what I'm saying right now about repackage, reposition, recycle, recreate, what all 4 of us are saying right now about that, and repackage this into a LinkedIn carousel PDF. Right. And it's like, it's gonna be great. And we might not change it for the audience, and we might not reposition it. But that's an example of repackaging. I'll give you one more example. Then, Lindsay, I'll pass it to you. You could repackage your live demo that your salespeople do, which is extremely common, right? That's what everyone does. Live demos. Adam loves a live demo. He's the king of live demos, by the way. If you want to see a live demo, go talk to Adam. He'll live demo you anything. You could instead do that with something like Novatic with interactive self-guided demos. Repackage that offer, which is very bottom of the funnel, into a new experience. I'll pause there. Lindsay, what do you think about repackaging?
I mean, I've been a content marketer for the last 20 years. And so to me, I hear repackaging, and it's another variation of repurposing. I mean, you're seeing it from and it's a good thing, from like a tech lens and experiences, repackaging experiences, which I love. And I think, I love hearing more people talking about repurposing and repackaging content. When we started this 5 years ago, I feel like we were ringing the bell out in a void for a little bit, and now it's everywhere, which is great. But I think capturing something like this, capturing a live demo, capturing a conversation, capturing an event, whatever it might be, and ringing it out across multiple channels. And it's not just, I mean, first of all, in 2024 and beyond, it should be table stakes for everything that we've been talking about so far, of like do more with less and just the tech that is available. It should be table stakes to say, record a show, turn it into a podcast and a webinar and a video and clips for your social media. Like, that's table stakes. Like, if you're not doing that yet, start yesterday. But also, we're seeing some pretty cool things about some of our customers are using like podcast content, event content as CX, like as customer support, yeah, exactly. Always be capturing information that can be used not just for content marketing for prospects, but for further engagement and delighting your customers, and for leadership and for the board to be like, hey, here's all these things that we did over the last quarter or over the last month. Here's all these snippets. Repackaging means not just for your prospect audience, but it can mean for your internal audience, can mean for sales enablement, for training, for board conversations. So think about all of those different audiences you have. So yeah, it can be across multiple channels for the same audience, or it can be for in multiple different ways for various different segments of your audience.
Yeah, I think to add to that, like, we hear a lot about all marketers and all CMOs becoming the heads of media companies. Great. That's expensive. And
not new, and like hasn't happened.
Yeah. And what I think people forget about is like the pipeline, the pipeline required. Like, to constantly produce new content is expensive. It's time consuming. Your audience also doesn't want it. Like, they want really thoughtful positions and point of views that they can fully digest. And I think this idea of digging into, Mark was saying earlier, digging in deeper on that content is a lot more valuable than to continually produce new stuff. And so when I talk about a pipeline, there is a way to continually extract from these core pieces, these core tenets of our vision, and produce more and more repackaged versions of it rather than recreating the wheel every time. And the technology platforms that are going to win this repurposing wave that we're seeing are technologies that not just allow you to take an individual item and create a bunch of clips with AI. It's about building a pipeline for you as a marketer to be able to take your Zoom call, immediately have it available, surface up some clips that I can use, and be able to distribute it to my sales team where it's valuable, or distribute it into my social team where they can create a calendar with it. It's a lot more than just simply, upload it to this tool and get a bunch of clips out. It's about the pipeline of capturing through getting it to the audience in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and I think the repackage or meet your audience where they're at is, if you don't do it, they're going to do it on their own, especially now, in the era of I can drop any link into a GPT and get the key summaries. Like, does spending a lot of time, effort, and money creating a 20-page ebook really make sense anymore? I honestly don't know. I think it might in some cases, but I think what people are looking for is that snackable type of content, which is another buzzword that you're seeing a lot right now, where if you don't do it for them, they're going to do it on their own. So,
Jonathan, my favorite meme that's happened in this AI era is somebody typing in bullet points into a GPT to expand it into a full email to get sent to someone who takes your email and has a GPT consolidate it down to bullet points.
It's all just
folks,
all one big circle.
Communicate clearly. Yeah, the circle is ridiculous, and that is what I think we as marketers do a lot.
Yeah.
And the better question is, how do I get the bullet point to the person in the right place? Yeah.
Well, what's the old Mark Twain quote? If I had more time, I would have wrote a shorter letter, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and I wrote in the chat, who's it for and why are you doing it? Right. The big thing here, is that I think is probably driving us all crazy is the more for the sake of more, right? You can just AI everything and we can just turn one thought into a million blog posts. Why?
Right.
Why? Let's all just take a hot second and say why. Because we're getting to the point that so quickly, you thought things were noisy 10 years ago. People say that there's too many podcasts. People say that there's too many blogs. We haven't seen anything yet based on how quickly just, blog posts and articles and memes and comments. And so I hope that we can start to get back to that, who's it for? Why am I doing it? What's the point? Why am I doing the thing and what am I hoping to get out of it?
Speaking of why are you doing it, Mark, tell us about this whiteboard. Is this a reaction, a way to stand out in the world of digital?
How do you repurpose that, Mark?
I want the story of the whiteboard here that is so powerful.
Well, yeah, so Rosa has a great question too. I'll give a few more examples. I gave that one about LinkedIn. I'll do two more, and then I'm going to challenge Lindsay and Adam to give you an example as well. How you're going to repurpose this event. So go back to the whiteboard though. I'll tie this all together. The whiteboard, you could create simple 3, 4, 5 different, whiteboard images. I'm not a great artist or picture, whatever, but what also LinkedIn loves? A face and a whiteboard. Just go smile. And I guarantee you take something from this webinar, put it on a whiteboard, people will love that, and you get engagement, right? So that's a second way to repurpose this. A third way to repurpose this is with Casted. You could take this and put into Casted and clip this up and have 3 to 4 video clips in a matter of 5 seconds. Adam can talk more about that, but that's another way. But But before I flip it to Lindsay for give you another example, then Adam, I want to call out that I'm all about authentic interactions. So it goes back to your question, Jonathan, about the whiteboard. Authentic interactions. That's my favorite type of AI, and that is what more and more marketers need to do as their time frees up with AI. I mean, I use AI for a decent amount of things, nothing crazy, maybe affecting 20% of my workload. Let us know in the chat maybe how much AI has affected your like workload or habits, work streams, whatever you want to call them. Mine's 20%. And that 20%, I'm getting back to like what matters the most, which is like connecting with people and designing different types of experiences. I'm like, not using digital slides anymore, whiteboards and Post-it notes. I got the gigantic Post-it note as well. So doing stuff like that. But I'll kick it to you, Lindsay. What do you think you should do to repurpose this content? What should we do?
Oh gosh, everything. Well, first, per my last point, my little rant, before you do anything, ask who's it for, why are you doing it, right? So don't just start, otherwise you're skipping right to tactics before you get into goals or objectives, right? Like who are we trying to reach? What are we trying to do? What's the outcome? But then some examples of what you can do. First, you should transcribe it and start to clip it up and say, okay, based on who I want to reach, how can I reach them in different ways that could engage them in different parts of their day, in different parts of their work life, in different time windows that they have, and that give them opportunities to get the sweet and little condensed version, the readable version, the audible version, the longer, deeper dive. Something that I think is really underrated as a specific tactic, once you've asked yourself, why am I even doing this thing and what's it for other than just the sake of more, is to actually go deeper. Everybody's trying to create like from something big, lots of little things. What if you take this and you write a really in-depth blog post or article that takes some of the key points that we talk about, you get it transcribed, you find some of the key points, and you dive even deeper. And you do that, hey, Mark and Jonathan and Adam and Lindsay talked about these cool things. Here's my thoughts on how you could really deep dive into how to do that thing. That's good for SEO, and it's good for understanding who from this was so engaged that they really wanted to learn more.
I've got kind of like another way to look at that, which is, when we are having this discussion live with a group of folks who can engage and ask, Q&A questions, it didn't work for everybody's schedule. Unfortunately, the entire world is not streaming this event right now, surprisingly. But one great way that we can repurpose it is to take some of these moments where we're asking interesting questions and get other people's perspectives. So taking the video recording where maybe Jonathan or Mark is asking a really great question, you hear maybe what Lindsay and I have to say, and you ask folks on social or you ask them wherever, what do you think? And see the discussion that comes from that. And suddenly you've taken a potential conversation that only us and this audience can have and expanded it to a much wider audience. And just think about, as a marketer, what are some of the ways that we measure ourselves? Reach is one of them. Engagement is another. And that does both really well. And it's something that doesn't cost a whole lot, assuming you have the right tooling in place. Hint, hint. But yeah, it's a really great way to expand and extend on that content by going deeper, to Lindsay's point.
I propose, Jonathan, we move on. We talk about repositioning. We talked enough about repackaging.
Lead the way, Mark.
So Jonathan, what does repositioning mean to you? How would you define that?
I think you could be on the right topic, but not for the right audience, or vice versa. That's something we do at The Juice, is topically and persona. We try to kind of 2x2 those two data points and say, hey, if you're building content for a VP of product marketing, here's the topics they care about, here's what they're searching for, and here's the format you should produce it in. And so I think a lot of times people could be creating really quality content, but they might have missed on the audience they're creating it for or the format they're creating it in. And they need to reposition one of or both of those to really have it resonate. Did I pass?
You did pass. It's pretty good.
You can start.
I'll give two more concrete examples because I know everyone loves examples. So never leave an offer behind. The two things you should reposition a lot as you think about taking a new offer to market, but also as you think about how to get more juice, see that, Jonathan, from the offer, see that, and amplify it. See that, Lindsay and Cassidy, and Adam, is positioning the headline of the offer, so the title. So obsess about how you could think about the title and the subheadline and make changes based off of both then the audience and the channel, right? So it's like the actual copy you use to sell the offer is a repositioning exercise. That's number one. Number two, I'd say the actual benefits. So the 3 bullets or whatever, the 3 value props, the core value prop statement, how you position it outside of the name and the subheadline, the headline and the sub. That is another thing when it comes to repositioning. It's so important to try different things. And I think a lot of marketers fail to do that. They fail to do it up front. And they also, and I'm guilty of this, I've failed to do this as well, where I don't spend enough time positioning it correctly out of the gate. And then I also don't spend enough time positioning it correctly based off of the audience, the channel I'm using it for.
There's an interesting concept around that the internet is not shaped by people, it's shaped by algorithms, where we at one time in the early internet had really interesting web design, truly creative, really out there ideas on how to browse a website or engage with content. And Google has sort of put everybody into the exact same box. We must have H1 here that performs this way, that does this thing. And you can start to see how creators mold to that, to Mark's point. So in the YouTube creator world, YouTubers will often launch a video with a thumbnail and a title. And when they see that it hasn't been picked up by the algorithm and shown to enough people, they'll try a different title. They'll try a different thumbnail. Whether it's good or bad, that Google has literally created the standard of how everything must look in order to be shown, that's the reality. And repositioning is part of an experimental process that marketers have to adopt in the way that folks have figured out on YouTube. My stuff didn't get picked up. I need to reposition it. So sometimes it's not just repositioning for your audience. Sometimes it's repositioning for the tools that you unfortunately are beheld to. And that's another way to think about one of the importance of repositioning.
Yeah, it's creativity within those constraints, I think.
Exactly.
Cool. Mark, I'm going to use halftime of our 4 conversation here. And we do have we have a question from the audience here. How do you scale when you have a 1 to 2 person team? What is the low hanging fruit? I see Lindsay rubbing her hands together. I've got a few thoughts here as well.
I'm ready.
But Lindsay, I'll let you lead the way.
Okay. I'll keep it short because I think we all have lots to say here. I have been a team of 1, and then I have been super excited to be a team of 2. I've also led a global team of like 25, right? And so when you're in either of those positions, it's important to be really focused about what you're trying to do. But specifically to answer this question, when it's 1 to 2 people, I am a broken record, but it's for a reason. Repurposing is it. So go focus on getting creative, have fun. Like, who's it for? Why are you doing it? What could you do that would be really fun and creative and that you know in your gut is going to be a good way to resonate with your audience, right? Do that. Do this. Record the thing. Have the conversation. Record the audio and the video, and then ring it out. And I don't mean how do you promote the video? I mean, how do you use that audio and video file, that 1 hour that you have, that one event, that one webinar, and you use that thing for a year. I've done it. And some of our customers that casted have done it too, to say, okay, I'm going to take that 1 hour. I'm going to split it up into like all of the different topics that were covered. You have to be really intentional about how you're going to do the interview or run the event or whatever it is. And for the rest, for every month for a year, you focus on one of the topics and you dive deep and you use clips and you create blog posts and you can do interactive polls and you can do reports and you can drive data, all from that one thing. And so when you hear repurposing, don't mistake, it's not a synonym for promotion. It's break it up and use it for a long time.
I will rant a little bit on that as well. Podcasting, how many, Mark, what does that say? Continue.
Cornerstone asset.
Cornerstone asset. Yeah. I think even like a podcast, like, we have a podcast. I don't care how many downloads it gets. I mean, I do, like, tangentially I do, but like what I really care about is it forces us to have the conversation with the customer, with the prospect, with the market, broadly speaking. And you're exactly right. That at least gives you the fuel for ideation, creation, atomization, repurposing. But it's such a good forcing function just to have the conversation that otherwise it'll be that thing that always gets deprioritized on your list. So I think that like pillar-based content, that cornerstone assets, a really great strategy for small marketing teams.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love the term pillar-based content anymore. I mean, I was a huge evangelist and kind of creator of it at HubSpot with Kieran and others. I mean, this goes back to like 2014, 15, and that was much more focused on like a pillar type of text-based asset, normally used for the algos. To Adam's point, SEO. It was all about search, right, instead of social now. And if you want to, the internet has shifted from a search-centric internet to a social-centric internet. And with that, it means you really need to have a cornerstone asset, like one of the best ones would be a video-based show, a video podcast show, because of all the reasons we've already talked about. So that's one example. So for that person,
especially if you have a whiteboard next to your face.
Well, yeah, you could do both, right? You could have you could have both. I also think there's three other things that I didn't have time to write on the whiteboard in time. It's but you can infuse them into this video-based show or other. You can infuse them. One would be stories. You kind of mentioned it. I think Jonathan, research. Like people, especially like higher end mid-market enterprise executive level buyers, are obsessed with research and done well. A big shout out to DataBox, and they have this really new DataBox, Pete Caputa, follow him on LinkedIn. He's got this amazing partnership research-based strategy that he's creating. He has a ton of free education about it. So research is the second type of cornerstone content. And then for me, there's two more. Third behind those two would be frameworks. Everyone loves a good framework, right? Don't leave an offer behind framework. I mean, how long did it take me to create that? Not very long. It's 4 parts. We could, I could expand that into a ton of different things. And then the fourth would be examples. Cannot underscore how important examples are when it comes to your go-to-market. Examples are as important as stories. And if you can weave stories and examples together, you'll have a very successful thing.
Yeah, I was going to drop it in the chat, but I'll just say it out loud. I think the frameworks is really, really good. I think we see on our platform where we have, 8 or 9 different content formats broadly categorized. Templates and toolkits outperform other content formats by a factor of 3x. Teach people, right? And I think there's multiple ways that can be a literal template, that can be a podcast where you talk very tactically about how to do something. But I think the more you teach somebody, the better it will go for you. Okay, Mark, I think we are on to recycle. I'm going to let you lead the way again here.
We're on to recycle. So we've achieved those two. Okay, now on to recycle. So I have a great example of this. And I got to do a quick promo for something that I'm very passionate about as I do this. So recycling. Imagine, I hope you all recycle. So you're recycling something. It could be plastic bottles, aluminum cans, paper, batteries. So just do batteries. I don't know too much about batteries, but I assume this is how it works, right? You recycle batteries and you have 100 batteries across the year you use. And those batteries then get turned into maybe another 100 batteries, but sometimes maybe 100 batteries get turned into one gigantic battery. So my example, using that metaphor, it's also kind of an analogy, but using that is I have created since April of last year a daily go-to-market tip in my private community. It's private because it's paid, but like Club PF, you can join at clubpf.co. We've created, through writing every day, I don't know, almost 250 to 300 tips. Imagine each of these as a battery. I'm recycling all of those into literally, it's going to be out this week for the members. I'm going to take some of it live next week. It took us about 2 weeks to do this, into like 130-page Google Doc, and it's going to be a physical and then digital book. I've recycled 300 or so, 250 tips that I did one a day for, the 2023, April to December 2023, into a book. I'm going to do that every year now because I read a daily tip. To me, that's just like so obvious. You could call that like maybe it's repackaging. I don't think so. I think that's different than repackaging personally, because you're recycling something that you've used maybe on a daily or weekly or monthly basis into something new, a completely new thing. So yeah, I would love to debate this. If feel free, Lindsay or Adam or Jonathan, if you think that's crap and that's really maybe repackaging.
I repurposing isn't on there. I think of what we talked about in repackaging and this recycling very similarly. Not enough to debate it because I think we should be doing all of them. But I guess like kind of following your logic there, something that comes to mind is that I like to recommend a lot, which is go back in time to data, right? Like, or a report that you have from 2010, and comparing where we are now versus where we were. Going back to a podcast interview that maybe your brilliant co-founder did in the first year of the company, talking about predictions for roadmap, or like AI, that had a purpose then, and it's a different purpose now. And so therefore it's recycling. I think quite often we're so on to the next, that we don't look back, especially that far. It's one of the reasons that we created Search and Casted, was to be able to search back and say, what do I have about? What do I have on, Apple Magic Mice, like that I can resurface and recycle for a new use.
I kind of view it play the hits, right? Like that's what people are there for, like you don't have to play a new track every single time. Like play some of your greatest hits. Don't be afraid to go back to what's worked previously.
I like to talk a lot with our customers about like the cost of the content that they've created. Like if you imagine each one of the pieces of content that you've created as like a VHS at a Blockbuster, how many shelves of pieces of content would you have? And are all of those movies useless, or are there some really good stuff in there that you could actually watch again, or maybe re-edit and re-release? There's enormous costs in the amount of thought, human capital, and real dollars that we invest in our content pipelines over a year. And sadly, we never use them again. And this idea around recycling is, in a way, responsibility, right? It's about taking the time and the effort that we put in and the dollars that we put in and getting more out of it so that we're less wasteful. And I think that message, and I think why Recycle Works is such a good term for this, it is that responsibility of getting more out of the time that we spent.
These are all very good answers. So I'll drop this in the chat because we'll get to the fourth one in a second. But that's how I, at least today, we can change, have thought about defining these four things differently from one another. And hopefully we're doing a good job to explain that. I will say your comment, Adam, brought something else up to the top of my mind that I'm stewing on and thinking about what to do with. So I like to watch Shark Tank. Does anyone else like to watch Shark Tank? Shark Tank's pretty interesting.
Catch it on social media, sure.
Pretty interesting.
Once upon a time.
By the way, they repackage and recycle that content, and there's a lot of reruns, David. Now there are reruns of Shark Tank.
Exactly.
So Shark Tank, you have these consumer products, and some of my favorite pitches are like, "We got the best new drink," blah 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 blah. And so when you think about what's happening in SaaS, B2B SaaS, there's only so much digital space on the shelves of these digital shelves. And it's now getting so hard to get your product on those digital shelves. That's basically it. If you look at G2 as an example, Scott Brinker's research he's been doing since 2010, there's only so much shelf space, even though you think there's infinite shelf space. There isn't. It is finite. And now you have so many products and so many products that are basically identical to one another. You're fighting for shelf space. So how do you get shelf space? And how do you get, which really means, how do you get the attention of someone to see your product and maybe want to touch it, play with it, pick it up? And at the end of the day, I think that's what we're talking a lot about during this conversation, is this idea of getting attention in the right ways through things that might, but in most cases, not related to what you actually sell. And to me, when you think about your offers, you have to be very thoughtful about reusing them. Lindsay, like you said it, it doesn't matter really what you call it, but repurposing, reusing, I think is the overarching term to this.
Yep.
And you have to be savvy at this these days, or you're going to waste, to your point, Adam, so much money and time. And you're also not going to create enough of a consistent drumbeat, which is the other one of the most important things when it comes to this discussion, is the drumbeat you're putting into the market.
Yep. All right, Mark, I want to rapid fire the recreate portion, because I do want to save a little bit of time for some of the sanity saving that we as leaders all do to kind of find the personal and professional balance, and how maybe tech is helping or hurting that. But let's hit recreate here to kind of wrap the 4 R's here. Mark Killen's 4 R's, trademarked, patent pending.
No.
Patent process is quite
recreate. I've done this so many times. I mean, I use the example of a certification course. So we wrote the conversation marketing blueprint at Drift, an ebook, a guide, which actually got a good amount of pickup. This was pre-COVID, during COVID. I do think, ebooks are they're not as interesting, especially for the generations that are coming. But we turned that into a video-based course, and that did very, very well. And you had both assets. So that's just recreating something from something that's been created, but it's a complete recreation. It's not like a recycling. Like you're using the original as a starting point, and you recreated a new asset basically.
It kind of reminds me of like roadshow content almost. You've got this great theme, like Lindsay, you kind of mentioned earlier. You take a presentation for an entire year. Well, it's like, how do you take that theme or that presentation and turn it into a field marketing event or a booth presence or something like that? Feels very similar to that kind of thematic content spread throughout the course of a year.
Yeah. And it's the thing that's good about it. First of all, this is not new. Years and years ago, actually part of the creation of Casted years ago was this whole recreate thing. And it was like, go do a study. If you have the means or the time to do a study, do that, gather the data, turn it into a show, a keynote, an event, a blog post, an article, all the things, again, over a really long period of time, and just keep wringing it out and wringing it out and wringing it out. And I think, again, not just about how many different ways can I tell this one audience what I'm going to tell them what I told them, tell them again, but also how can I use the same content, remember, for different audiences? How can I manage up to leadership? How can I make sure that executive leadership globally or my one founder knows what's happening? How can I make sure that my customers are getting the same message, but again, recreated in a different way that says, hey, here's what we're talking about. Here's how it's applicable for you. How can I speak to both senior level and more junior level end users? There's lots of different ways to take that one thing, repackage it, recreate it, repurpose it, recycle it across many, many different ways.
I think a really easy rule of thumb with any of these R's is, if someone wanted to click in on something, where would you take them? If they saw something on social that they found interesting, what should they do next? And that is a really interesting way to then apply one of the 4 R's. Figure out, could I take this topic and recreate it into a deeper course, into a book, like for someone who wants to click into something. The opposite is also true. Folks who are you have a small audience who is getting into the course, but how do you help more people find the course? And that's another way to apply any of these 4 R's, is how do I get the word out to more audiences, or to where my audience is? And that is the whole point of what to think about in 2024 with repurposing, is how do I help folks click into stuff, or how do I help folks find the stuff that I've made?
I love that. We did it.
You did it. All right. You can go back to the original purpose of this webinar, Jonathan.
No, that was the original purpose. I love it. That was good framework for us to work through. That's healthy. But I do. So I want to end on the sanity saving tech piece. I'm curious for all 3 of you, and you can take it professionally, you can take it personally, and I'm actually maybe even more curious, like personally, as leaders across all of each other's own respective businesses. I think the pace is fast and getting faster. Like, is there any of this AI emerging or just emerging technology at all that you all are leaning on really heavily right now, either professionally and or to kind of personally help keep yourself sane in 2024?
Yeah, I can go first on that one. It's not content related. It's actually something that quite literally keeps me sane. It's called reclaim.ai, and it's a calendar assistant tool. And it's actually out of your way. It does not require me to chat with an AI and ask to prompt it anything. But it does a great job of helping me establish what my priorities are, and block and tackle on my calendar so that I have room to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. And I think it's one of the really great examples of how AI can actually help you, and kind of get out of the way as well. Not make it so much about we're using AI, but actually create a lot of utility using some of these technologies.
I love that.
Yeah. Adam introduced me to reclaim.ai, and my first reaction was like, another thing. But I'm really glad, because it hasn't been another thing. It's been a really helpful thing. So mine is kind of philosophical. So I think we're all content marketers or working with content marketers here, and our brains immediately go to AI is creating content. And if you just reframe it and remember that a lot of the rest of the world isn't necessarily thinking that way, and you yourself thinks in a different way, not saying, oh gosh, should I be using AI to create content? No, use AI to free up time to be more creative, right? To do, if you're a writer, write. If you're a creator, if you want to record things, if you do podcasts, like if you're a creator, create. Use things like reclaim.ai or other things that can take all the gunk off of your plate so that you can focus. You can actually get into focus time and create. And I
don't use AI for the sake of using AI. Right?
No. Oh, no. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I agree with that. So here are the top things I'm using AI for. Clips, email follow-up. It writes my email follow-up. That's more experimental right now, but I found an awesome tool that will literally take a call transcript, call recording, and write your email follow-up with like 96% accuracy. No exaggeration, like super good. Images, starting to get dangerous with images. Transcripts, been doing that for a long time. And then ideation. Ideation, it's very helpful for ideation.
Love it. How about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm super curious to use Reclaim now. I have had some success with the post-event like snippet creation with different tools. I think there are a lot of tools doing that now, but have had some success with that. Honestly, like this is maybe not the point of this event, but my biggest sanity saver is my notebook, which I feel like AI can't replace, right? And if anything, like that almost becomes my refuge for like, okay, I'm gonna like I need to clear all this pace and like go right and like or organize my to-do list that way. I've got a bullet. It's bullet journaling if people are familiar with that. It's similar to that, but I've got a very specific like way to keep my to-do list, way to organize my to-do list, and it's almost like all of this technology and emerging and increasing pace actually redirects me back to some old school tips and tricks, like a whiteboard or like my notebook, that become very powerful for me. Reclaim. Yes, we'll have to get you on that commission train, Adam, for sure.
Yeah, I wish I had
Got
like
your
an
affiliate
affiliate
link.
link or something.
Yeah. Well, cool. All right, I'm going to round robin here real fast to wrap this event. What's your kind of parting thought for marketers and leaders as you head into 2024? Why don't we go in the same order we did introductions? Lindsay, I'll let you lead the way.
Do more with less does not have to be a punishment. It can be a permission slip to focus on doing whatever it takes to prioritize human connection and to just get really weird and creative.
That's so good. I love that.
Mine would be, how do we be more responsible with our time? We're asking a lot of our teams, we're asking a lot of ourselves in a time that a lot is going on in the world. And how do we work responsibly and give ourselves permission to have the right balance in life, give our teams that right permission? And therefore, how do we use our time responsibly so that it can be really quality stuff? And a lot of that's going to come to how to reuse the investments that we've already made.
Those are good. So I'm going to, I think, slightly modify a Chris Dixon quote. I'm sure some of you folks have heard this before. But everything is a toy until it isn't. So go explore.
I love
Love
that.
it.
Far less philosophical, but I would say, yeah, similar in theme. Like, now is actually an opportunity for marketers to be opportunistic, whether that's through some of the emerging technology or through kind of zigging when others are zagging. I think now's the time to go on offense. Well, I appreciate all of your all's time. I appreciate our audience's time today. If you want to learn more, this is the way to get a hold of everyone here. The recording will be repackaged, repositioned, recycled, recreated, and available on the Juice platform. If you want to learn more about TACK and Club PF, go there. And Casted can help you create the right content. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Special thank you to all of our guests. This was genuinely fun, and I really mean that. And I swear I don't say that on every event. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to the guests. Thank you to the audience. And we will be in touch with more inspiration very soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.